Welcome back, second grade friends. We are continuing on with the Tale of Despereaux. And last time that we met, we talked about what good readers do while they read. We talked about if parts are confusing, we go back and we reread to make sure that we understand before moving on. And today we're going to continue that conversation or that discussion about what do good readers do while we're reading. The chapters that we're going to be reading today have a lot of awesome vocabulary in them. So today we're going to focus on what good readers do when they come across words that they don't know. So in the email that we sent you, I included a little mini dictionary for this section of chapters. And I also included a little worksheet for you to fill out while we're reading. So there's about 8 words that we're gonna learn today while we're reading, and I'll give you a heads up when we come across the words. And go ahead and pause the video, look up the word on the little mini dictionary that I sent you, and fill out your personal dictionary worksheet that I sent you. So when we come across one of the 8 words that we're learning today, we're going to pause the video, get out the mini dictionary that I sent you, and copy the definition into your personal dictionary worksheet. Okay? Dictionaries are really important because they help us define words that we don't know. When I'm reading a chapter book or a textbook or any big book that has some words that I don't know, I always make sure that I put my finger on where the word is, go look it up in either the paper dictionary or online. And once I know the definition, I go back and reread, just like what we learned last week. I go back and reread the sentence that had the word in it that I didn't know. So that way I can understand what I'm reading, because good readers want to comprehend. We want to understand what we're reading. So I went ahead and I printed out the mini dictionary that I sent you guys. So I have it on the side here so that when I come across the words that we don't know, when you pause the video, I'll give you a few seconds to pause it. You'll look it up on your own, you'll write it down, and then once you play the video, I'll go over the definitions with you so that we can all be learners and good readers together, okay? So good readers, before we just start reading, we always want to recap what we just read, right? So in the last few chapters that we read, we learned that Roscoe the rat and Miguel were taking Princess P down to the dungeon. Okay, so let's get started. Chapter 39, Missing. The sun rose and shed light on what Roscoe and Miguel had done, and finally Despereaux awoke. But alas, he awoke too late. "I haven't seen her," Louis was shouting, "and I tell you, I wash my hands of her. If she's missing, I say good riddance to bad rubbish." Despereaux sat up. He looked behind him. Oh, his tail! Gone! Given over to the knife, and where the tail should be, nothing but a bloody stub. And more foul play! Gregory, dead! Shouted Cook. Poor old man, that rope of his broken by who knows what, and him lost in the dark and frightened to death because of it. It's too much. "Oh no," whispered Despereaux. "Oh no, Gregory is dead?" The mouse got to his feet and began the long climb down from the shelf. Once he was on the floor, he stuck his head around the door of the pantry and saw Cook standing in the center of the kitchen, wringing her fat hands. Beside her stood a tall woman jangling a ring of keys. "That's right," said Louise. "All of the king's men were down there searching for her in the dungeon, and when they come back up, who do they have with them? They have the old man. And now you tell me that Mig is missing, and I say, who cares?" Despereaux made a small noise of despair. Despair is our first vocabulary word. So go ahead and pause the video, get out your mini dictionary, and find the word despair. Despair is spelled D-E-S-P F-A-I-R. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video. All right, now that you guys are back and you guys have looked up the definition in your dictionary, I'm going to go over the definition with you. So on the mini dictionary sheet that I gave you guys, it says despair is a verb, and it means to lose all hope or confidence. So let's go back and reread that sentence. Despereaux made a small noise of despair. So the noise that he made had no hope or confidence in it. He had slept too long. The rat had already acted. The princess was gone. What kind of world is it, Miss Louise, where princesses are taken from right under our noses and queens drop dead and we can't even take comfort in soup? And with this, Cook started to cry. Shh, said Louise. I beg you, do not say that word. Soup, shouted Cook. I will say it. No one can stop me. Soup, soup, soup. And then she began to cry, wailing and sobbing. Oh, there, she said, Louise. She put her hand out to touch Cook, and Cook slapped it away. It will be all right, said Louise. Cook brought the hem of her apron up to wipe her tears. It won't, she said. It won't be all right ever again. They've taken our little darling away. There ain't nothing left to live for without princesses. Despereaux was amazed to have exactly what was in his heart spoken out loud by such a ferocious, mouse-hating woman as Cook. Ferocious is our second vocabulary word. So go ahead and get out your mini dictionary and your personal dictionary, pause the video, fill out the definition on your paper, and then once you're done, go ahead and click play again so we can read the definition together, okay? So go ahead and pause the video, and ferocious is spelled F-E-R-O-C-I-O-U-S, ferocious. Alrighty, now that you have filled out the definition for ferocious on your chart, I'm going to go ahead and take out my personal mini dictionary and find the word ferocious. And ferocious is an adjective, and it means fierce or savage. So let's read the sentence that had ferocious in it again. Despereaux was amazed to have exactly what was in his heart spoken out loud by such a ferocious or fierce and savage, mouse-hating woman as Cook. Louise again reached out to touch Cook, and this time Cook allowed her to put an arm around her shoulder. What will we do? What will we do? Wailed Cook. And Louise said, shh, there. Alas, there was no one to comfort Despereaux, and there was no time anyway for him to cry. He knew that he had to do something. He had to find the king. For, having heard Roscaro's plan, reader, Despereaux knew that the princess was hidden in the dungeon, and being somewhat smarter than Miggerisseau, he sensed the terrible, unspoken truth behind Roscaro's words. He knew that Mig could never be a princess, and he knew that the rat, once he captured the pea, would never let her go. And so, the small mouse, who had been dipped in oil, covered in flour, and relieved of his tail, slipped out of the pantry and past the weeping ladies. He went to find the king. Chapter 40. Forgiveness. He went first to the throne room, but the king was not there. And so, Despereaux slipped through a hole in the molding and was making his way to the princess's room when he came upon the Mouse Council. 13 mice and one most very honored head mouse sitting around their piece of wood debating important mouse matters. Do we remember the Mouse Council from earlier in the book? The Mouse Council was the group of mice that sent Despereaux to the dungeon way back at the beginning of the book. Despereaux stopped and stood very still. "Fellow honored mice," said the most very honored head mouse, and then he looked up from the makeshift table and saw Despereaux. "Despereaux," he whispered. The other mice of the council leaned forward, straining to make sense of the word that the head mouse had just uttered or said. Pardon? One said. Excuse me? Said another. I didn't hear right, said a third. I thought you said Despereaux. The head mouse gathered himself. He tried speaking again. Fellow members, he said. A ghost! A ghost! And he raised a shaking paw and pointed it at Despereaux. The other mice turned and looked. And there was Despereaux Tilling, covered in flour, looking back at them, the telltale red thread still around his neck. Despereaux, said Lester. Son, you have come back. Remember, Lester is Despereaux's dad. Despereaux looked at his father and saw an old mouse whose fur was shot through with gray. That means his hair turned gray. How could that be? Despereaux had only been gone a few days, but his father seemed to have aged many years in his absence. Son, ghost of my son, said Lester, his whiskers trembling, which means shaking. I dream about you every night. I dream about beating the drum that sent you to your death. I was wrong. What I did was wrong. No, called the most very honored head mouse. No. I've destroyed it, said Lester. I've destroyed the drum. Will you forgive me? He clasped his front paws together and looked at his son. No, shouted the head mouse again. No, do not ask the ghost to forgive you, Lester. You did as you should. You did what was best for the mouse community. Lester ignored the head mouse. Son, he said, please. Despereaux looked at his father, and his gray-streaked fur and trembling whiskers and his front paws clasped together in front of his heart, and he suddenly felt as if his own heart would break in two. His father looked so small, so sad. Forgive me, said Lester again. Forgiveness, reader, is, I think, something very much like hope and love, a powerful, wonderful thing. And a ridiculous thing, too. Isn't it ridiculous that, after all, to think that a son could forgive his father for beating the drum that sent him to his death? Isn't it ridiculous to think that a mouse could ever forgive anyone for such perfidy? You guys, we are on our third vocab word, is perfidy. Perfidy is spelled P-E-R-F-I-D-Y, perfidy. So go ahead and get out your dictionary and your personal dictionary worksheet and pause the video, look up the word perfidy on the dictionary page and copy the definition onto your worksheet page. Go ahead and pause the video and then play it once you're done, okay? All right, guys, now that we have gotten the definition perfidy down on our worksheet, we're going to go through the definition together. Okay, so I'm going to get out my dictionary, find the word perfidy, and perfidy is a noun, and it says the quality or state of being faithless or disloyal. Okay, so let's reread that sentence again, now that we know the definition of perfidy. Isn't it ridiculous to think that a mouse could ever forgive anyone for such perfidy, or faithlessness, or disloyal? Okay, so that makes sense. Let's keep reading. But still, here are the words of Despereaux Tilling spoke to his father. He said, I forgive you, Pa. And he said those words because he sensed that it was the only way to save his own heart, to stop it from breaking in two. Despereaux, reader, spoke those words to save himself. And then he turned from his father and spoke to the whole mouse council. You were wrong, he said, all of you. You asked me to renounce my sins. I ask you to renounce yours. You wronged me. Repent. Never, said the head mouse. Despereaux stood before the mouse council, and he began to realize that he was a different mouse than he had been the last time he faced them. He had been to the dungeon and back out of it. He knew things that they would never know. What they thought of him, he realized, did not matter at all. And so, without saying another word, Despereaux turned and left the room. After he was gone, the head mouse clapped his trembling paw on the table. Mice of the council, he said, we have been paid a visit by a ghost who has told us to repent. We will now take a vote. All in favor of saying that this visit did not occur, vote aye. And from the members of the Mouse Council, there came a tiny but emphatic chorus of ayes. So a lot of the mice said aye. Only one mouse said nothing. Can we guess who it is? Right, it's Despereaux's dad. That mouse was Despereaux's father. Lester Tilling had turned his head away from the other members of the Mouse Council. He was trying to hide his tears. He was crying, reader, because he had been forgiven. Chapter 41. The Tears of a King. Despereaux found the king in the Peas' room, sitting on his daughter's bed, clutching the tapestry of her life to his chest, and he was weeping, although weeping really is too small of word for the activity that the king had undertaken. Tears were cascading from his eyes. Guys, cascading is our next vocabulary word. Cascading is spelled C-A-S-C-A-D-I-N-G. Cascading. So go ahead and get out your dictionary and your worksheet. Find the word cascading in the dictionary, and then copy the definition onto your worksheet. And go ahead and pause the video now and then play it again once you're done. Alrighty, so now that you're done copying the definition, I'm going to look it up on my sheet and let's go through it together. Okay, so cascade is a verb, and it says to fall in, or as if in a cascade. When I think of the word cascade, I think of a waterfall cascading over the rocks, heading down a cliff like this, cascading. So let's read the sentence that has the word cascading in one more time. Tears were cascading from his eyes. Can you guys imagine that? If you're crying and the tears are just cascading, they're just like flowing off your face, just like a waterfall almost. That's a lot of tears. The king must be very sad. A small puddle formed at his feet. I am not exaggerating. The king, it seemed, was intent on crying himself a river. Reader, have you ever seen a king cry? When the powerful are made weak, when they are revealed to be human, to have hearts, their diminishment is nothing short of terrifying. Oh, we're at our next vocabulary word already. Diminishment. Ooh, that's a big word. Diminishment is spelled D-I-M-I-N-I-S-H-M-E-N-T. Diminishment. Okay, so go ahead and get out your mini dictionary and your worksheet. Find the word diminishment, and then go ahead, copy the definition, and play the video again once you're done. Okay, ready? So pause the video. Alrighty, now that you're done copying the definition, I'm going to look it up on my little mini dictionary, and let's go through it together. Diminish. Diminish is a verb, and it's to make less or cause to appear less, to lessen the authority, dignity, or reputation of, to belittle, to gradually become less, as in size or importance, dwindle, diminish. Oh, okay, so it's to make less or to cause to appear less, to lessen authority. So let's read that sentence that has the word diminishment in again. When the powerful are made weak, when they are revealed to be human, to have hearts, their diminishment is nothing short of terrifying. You can be sure that Despereaux was terrified, absolutely, but he spoke up anyway. Sir, the mouse said to the king, but the king did not hear him, and as Despereaux watched, King Philip dropped the tapestry and took his great golden crown from his lap and used it to beat himself over the chest over and over again. The king, as I had already mentioned, has several faults. He was nearsighted. He made ridiculous, unreasonable, difficult to enforce laws, and much in the way of Megariso, he was not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer. But there was one extraordinary, wonderful, admirable thing about the king. He was a man who was able to willingly love with his whole heart. And just as he had loved the queen with his whole heart, so too he loved his daughter with the whole of it, even more than the whole. He loved the Princess P with every particle of his being, and she had been taken from him. But what Despereaux had come to say to the king had to be said, and so he tried again. "Excuse me," he said. He wasn't certain, really, how a mouse should address the king. Sir did not seem like a big enough word. Despereaux thought about it for a moment. He cleared his throat. He spoke as loudly as he was capable of speaking. "Excuse me, most very honored head person." King Philip stopped beating his crown against his chest. He looked around the room. "Down here, most very honored head person," said Despereaux. The king, tears still falling from his eyes, looked at the floor. He squinted. "Is that a bug speaking to me?" he asked. "No," said Despereaux. "I am a mouse. We met before." "A mouse," said the king. "A mouse is but one step removed from a rat." Basically, the king is saying that mice are like rats. They're related to rats. "Sir," said Despereaux, "most very honored head person, please, you have to listen to me. This is important. I know where your daughter is." "You do?" said the king. He sniffed. He blew his nose on his royal cloak. "Where?" he said, and as he bent over to look more closely at Despereaux, 1 tear, 2 tears, 3 enormous king-sized tears fell with an audible plop, which audible means like you're able to hear it. Fell with an audible plop onto Despereaux's head and rolled down his back, washing away the white of the flower and revealing his own brown fur. "Sir, most very honored head person, sir," said Despereaux as he wiped the king's tears out of his own eyes. "She's in the dungeon." "Liar," said the king. He sat back up. "I knew it. All rodents are liars and thieves. She is not in the dungeon. My men have searched the dungeon." "But no one really knows the dungeon except the rats, sir. There are thousands of places where she could be hidden, and only the rats would know. Your men would never be able to find her if the rats did not want her to be found." "Ach!" said the king as he clapped his hands over his ears. "Do not speak to me of rats and what they know," he shouted. "Rats are illegal. Rats are against the law. There are no rats in my kingdom. They do not exist." Do you think that's true? Do you think that there are really no rats in the king's kingdom? "Sir, most very honored head person, that is not true. Hundreds of rats live in the dungeon of this castle. One of them has taken your daughter, and if you will send..." The king started humming. "I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And anyway, what you say is wrong because you are a rodent and therefore a liar." He started to hum again. And then he stopped, and he said, "I have hired fortune tellers and a magician. They are coming from a distant land. They will tell me where my beautiful daughter is. They will speak the truth. A mouse cannot speak the truth." "I am telling you the truth," said Despereaux. "I promise." But the king would not listen. He sat with his hands over his ears. He hummed loudly. Big fat tears rolled down his face and fell to the floor. Despereaux sat and stared at him in dismay, which means in disbelief. What should he do now? He put a nervous paw to his neck and pulled at the red thread. Suddenly, his dream came flooding back to him. The dark and the light and the knight swinging his sword and the terrible moment when he had realized that the suit of armor was empty. And then, reader, as he stood before the king, a wonderful, amazing thought occurred to the mouse. What if the suit of armor had been empty for a reason? What if it had been empty because it was waiting for him? "You know me." That was what the knight in his dream had said. "Yes," said Despereaux out loud in wonder, "I do know you." "I can't hear you," sang the king. "I'll have to do it myself," said the mouse. I will be the knight in shining armor. There is no other way. It has to be me. Despereaux turned. He left the weeping king. He went to find the Threadmaster. We know the Threadmaster. We read about him in the beginning of the book. The Threadmaster was the one whose breath smelled of celery and who tied the red thread around Despereaux's neck like a leash so that the two mice could walk him down the dungeon. We know the Threadmaster. I wonder what he's going to say to the Threadmaster. Chapter 42. The Rest of the Thread. The Threadmaster was sitting atop his spool of thread, swinging his tail back and forth and eating a piece of celery. Well, look here, he said when he saw Despereaux. Would you just look at that? It's the mouse who loved the human princess. Back from the dungeon in one piece. The old Threadmaster would say that I didn't do my job well, that because you're still alive, I must have tied the thread incorrectly, but it is not so. But it is not so. And how do I know it is not so? Because the thread is still around your neck. He nodded and took a bite of celery. I need the rest of it, said Despereaux. The rest of what, your neck? No, the rest of the thread. Well, I can't just hand it over to any old mouse, said the Threadmaster. They say red thread is special, sacred, though I myself, after having spent so much time with it, know it for what it is. What is it? Said Despereaux. Thread, said the Threadmaster. He shrugged and took another loud bite of celery. Nothing more, nothing less. But I pretend, friend, I pretend. And what, I may ask, do you intend to do with the thread? Save the princess. Ah, yes, the princess, the beautiful princess. That's how this whole story started, isn't it? I have to save her, but there is no one but me to do it. It seems to be the way with most things. No one to do the really disagreeable jobs except oneself. And how exactly will you use a spool of thread to save a princess? A rat has taken her and hidden her in the dungeon, so I have got to go back to the dungeon, and it's full of twists and turns and hidden chambers. Oh, chambers is the next vocabulary word. So chambers is spelled C-H, which makes the ch sound, C-H-A-M-B-E-R-S, chambers. So go ahead and get out your mini dictionary and your worksheet, copy the definition of chambers onto your worksheet, and then go ahead and click play on the video once you're done. So go ahead and pause the video now. Alrighty, and now that you guys have copied the definition of chamber into your worksheet, let's go over it together. So chamber, right here, chamber is a noun. So it says a room in a house, and especially a bedroom. Oh, okay, so it's basically like a room is a chamber. So let's read the sentence that has the word chamber in it again. I have to go back to the dungeon, and it is full of twists and turns and hidden chambers, so hidden rooms. Oh, okay. Like a maze, said the Threadmaster. Yes, like a maze, and I have to find my way to her, wherever she is hidden. There's a loud truck outside, guys. Oh, I think it's gonna go away. Okay, let's keep reading. Yes, like a maze, and I have to find my way to her, wherever she is hidden, and then I have to lead her back out again, and the only way to do that is with the thread. Gregory the jailer tied a rope around his ankles so that he would not get lost. As the mouse said this, he shuddered, thinking of Gregory and his broken rope, dying, lost in the darkness. Said Despereaux, I will use the thread. The Threadmaster nodded. I see, he said. He took a meditative bite of celery, which means he was kind of thinking while he took the bite. You, friend, are on a quest. I don't know what that is, said Despereaux. You don't have to know. You just have to feel compelled to do the thing, the impossible, important task at hand. Impossible? Said Despereaux. Impossible, said the Threadmaster. Important. He sat chewing his celery and staring somewhere past Despereaux, and then suddenly he leapt off his spool. "Who am I to stand in the way of a quest?" he said. "Roll her away." "I can have it?" "Yes, for your quest." Despereaux put his front paws up and touched the spool. He gave an experimental push forward. "Thank you," he said, looking into the eye of the threadmaster. "I don't know your name." "Hovis." "Thank you, Hovis." "There's something else, something that belongs with the thread." Hovis went into a corner and came back with a needle. "You can use it for protection." "Like a sword," said Despereaux, "like a knight would have." "Yes," said Hovis. He gnawed off a length of thread and used it to tie the needle around Despereaux's waist. "Like so." "Thank you, Hovis," said Despereaux. He put his right shoulder against the spool of thread and pushed it forward. "Wait," said Hovis. He stood up on his hind legs, put his paws on Despereaux's shoulders, and leaned in close to him. Despereaux smelled the sharp, clean scent of celery as the threadmaster bent his head, took hold of the thread around Despereaux's neck in his sharp teeth, and pulled on it hard. "There," said Hovis, when the piece of thread broke and dropped to the ground. "Now you're free. You see, you're not going to the dungeon because you have to. You're going because you want to." "Yes," said Despereaux, "because I am on a quest." The word felt good and right in his mouth. Quest. Say it, reader. Say the word quest out loud. Quest. It is an extraordinary word, isn't it? So small and yet so full of wonder, so full of hope. "Goodbye," said Hovis as Despereaux pushed the spool of thread out of the threadmaster's hole. "I have never known a mouse who had made it out of the dungeon only to go back in it again. Goodbye, friend. Goodbye, mouse among mice." And there's a little picture for us. That's Despereaux with the needle around his waist and pushing the spool of thread out of Hovis, the threadmaster's, home. Chapter 43. What Cook Was Stirring. That night, Despereaux rolled the thread from the threadmaster's lair. Among innumerable hallways, which mean you can't even count them, there's so many. Innumerable hallways and down 3 flights of stairs. Reader, allow me to put this in perspective for you. Your average house mouse, or castle mouse if you will, weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 ounces. That's pretty light. Despereaux, as you well know, was in no way average. He was, in fact, so incredibly small that he weighed about half of what the average mouse weighs, 2 ounces. That is all. Think about it. He was nothing but 2 ounces of mouse pushing a spool of thread that weighed almost as much as he did. Honestly, reader, what do you think the chances are of such a small mouse succeeding in his quest? Zip, zero, nada, goose eggs. Those are all ways of saying no chance. But you must, when you are calculating the odds of a mouse's success, factor in his love for the princess. Love, as we have already discussed, is a powerful, wonderful, ridiculous thing capable of moving mountains and spools of thread. Even with the love and the purpose in his heart, Despereaux was very, very tired when he reached the door to the castle kitchen at midnight. His paws were shaking and his muscles were jumping, and the place where his tail should be was throbbing. And he still had a very, very long way to go. Into the kitchen, down the many stairs of the dungeon, and then through somehow, some way, through the rat-filled darkness of the dungeon itself, not knowing where he was going. And, oh, reader, when he stopped to consider what lay ahead of him, Despereaux was filled with an icky feeling of despair. Guys, we learned the word despair. Do you remember what it means? Yeah, so despair means to lose all hope or confidence. So he had an icky feeling of hopelessness or a lack of confidence. He leaned his head against a spool of thread, and he smelled celery there, and he thought of Hovis, and how Hovis seemed to believe in him and his quest. Oh, there goes the truck again. So the mouse raised his head and squared his shoulders and pushed the spool of thread forward again into the kitchen, where he saw, too late, that there was a light burning. Despereaux froze. Cook was in the kitchen. She bent over the stove. She was stirring something. Was it a sauce? No. What is it? Was it a stew? No. What Cook was stirring was, can you guys guess? It was soup. Soup, reader, in the king's own castle, against the king's law, right under the king's very nose. Cook was making soup. And the mouse looked on. Cook put her face into the steam rising from the pot and took a deep breath. She smiled a beautiful smile, and the steam rose around her and caught the light of the candle and made a halo over her head. Despereaux knew how Cook felt about mice in her kitchen. He remembered quite clearly her instructions to Mig regarding himself. Kill him. The only good mouse is a dead mouse. But he had to go through Cook's kitchen to get to the dungeon door, and he had no time to waste. Soon, daylight would dawn, and the whole castle would be awake, and a mouse would have no chance at all of pushing a spool of thread across the floor without attracting a great deal of attention. He would have to sneak past the mouse-hating Cook. And so, screwing his courage to the sticking place, Despereaux leaned against the spool of thread and set it rolling across the floor. Cook turned from the stove, a dripping spoon in her hand and a frightened look on her face, and shouted, "Who's there?" Chapter 44. Whose ears are those? "Who's there?" shouted Cook again. Despereaux, wisely or smartly, said nothing. The kitchen was silent. Said Cook. "Nothing. It's nothing at all. Just my nervous Nelly ears playing tricks on me." "You old fool," she said to herself as she turned back to the stove. "You're just an old fool afraid of being caught making soup." Despereaux slumped against the spool of thread, which kind of, like, this is a slump. And as he leaned there, his heart pounding, his paws shaking, a small, wonderful something occurred. A midnight breeze entered the kitchen and danced over to the stove and picked up the scent of the soup and then swirled across the floor, delivering the smell right directly to the mouse's nose. Despereaux put his head up in the air. He sniffed. He sniffed some more. He had never in his life smelled anything so lovely, so inspiring. Second graders, we are at our next vocabulary word. Our word is inspiring. Inspiring. Inspiring is spelled I-N-S-P-I-R-I-N-G. Inspiring. So go ahead and get out your mini dictionary and your worksheet. Find the word inspiring on your dictionary. Copy the definition onto your worksheet. And then go ahead and click play on the video again when you're done. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video. All right, now that you're done copying the definition to your worksheet, let's go over it together. So I have my mini dictionary here, and I found the word inspire. And inspire is a verb, and it says to move or guide by divine influence. Oh, okay. To move or guide by divine influence. Some other definitions on this paper say to cause to have a particular thought or feeling. To make spirited. So inspire is to be moved by something, to have to make spirited. So let's read the sentence again now that we know the definition of inspiring. He had never in his life smelled anything so lovely, so inspiring. So he was moved by the smell of the soup. With each sniff he took, he felt himself growing stronger and braver. Cook leaned in close to the kettle and put the spoon and put the spoon in and took the spoon out and blew upon the spoon and then brought it to her lips and sipped and swallowed. She said. She took another sip. Missing something, she said. More salt, maybe? She put the spoon down and took up an enormous salt shaker and sprinkled salt into the kettle. And Despereaux, feeling emboldened, which means brave, by the smell of the soup, again set to work pushing the spool of thread. Quickly, he said to himself, rolling the spool across the floor. Do it quickly. Do not think, just push. Cook whirled the salt shaker in her hand and shouted, Who goes there? Despereaux stopped pushing. He hid behind the spool of thread as Cook took the candle from the stove and held it up high. She said. The candlelight came closer, closer. What's this? The light came to rest directly on Despereaux's big ears, sticking up from behind the spool of thread. Huh, said Cook. Whose ears are those? And the light from the candle then shone full in Despereaux's face. A mouse, said Cook. A mouse in my kitchen. Despereaux closed his eyes. He prepared for his death. He waited, reader, and waited. And then he heard the sound of laughter. He opened his eyes and looked at Cook. Said Cook. For the first time in my life, I am glad to see a mouse in my kitchen. Why? She asked. Why am I glad? Because a mouse is not a king's man here to punish me for making soup. That is why. Because a mouse is not a king's man here to take me to the dungeon for owning a spoon. A mouse? I, Cook, am glad to see a mouse. Cook's face was red and her stomach was shaking. Oh, she said again, and not just any mouse. A mouse with a needle tied around his waist. A mouse with no tail. Ain't it lovely? She took her head and wiped out her eyes. Look, Mouse, these are extraordinary times, and because of that, we must have some peace between us. I will not ask what you are doing in my kitchen, and you, in return, will tell no one what I'm cooking. She turned then and went back to the stove, and set down the candle and picked up the spoon and again put it in the pot of soup and took it back out and tasted the soup, smacking her lips together. Not right, she said. Not quite right. It's missing something still. Despereaux did not move. He could not move. He was paralyzed by fear. He sat on the kitchen floor. One small tear fell out of his left eye. He had expected Cook to kill him. Instead, reader, she had laughed at him. And he was surprised how much her laughter hurt. Chapter 45. Some Soup. Cook stirred the soup and put the spoon down and held up the candle and looked over at Despereaux. What are you waiting for? She said. Go, go, go. There will never be another opportunity for a mouse to escape from my kitchen unharmed. The smell of soup again wafted, which means kind of like flew or like a breeze wafts, wind wafts. The smell of soup again wafted in Despereaux's direction. He put his nose up in the air. His whiskers trembled. Yes, said Cook, that is soup that you are smelling. The princess, not that you would know or care, is missing. Bless her good-hearted self. And times are terrible. And when times are terrible, soup is the answer. Don't it smell like the answer? Yes, said Despereaux. He nodded. Cook turned away from him. She put the candle down and picked up her spoon and started to stir. Oh, she said, these are dark days, and shook her head, and I'm kidding myself. There ain't no point in making soup unless others eat it. Soup needs another mouth to taste it, another heart to be warmed by it. She stopped stirring. She turned and looked at Despereaux. Mouse, said Cook, would you like some soup? And then, without waiting for an answer, she took a saucer and spooned some soup into it and set it on the kitchen floor. Come closer, she said. I don't aim to hurt you, I promise. Despereaux sniffed. The soup smelled wonderful, incredible. Keeping one eye on the cook, he stepped out from behind the spool of thread and crept closer. Go on, said Cook. Taste it. Despereaux stepped onto the saucer. Soup covered his paws. He bent his head into the hot broth. He sipped. Oh, it was lovely. Garlic and chicken and watercress, the same soup that Cook had made the day the Queen died. How is it? Asked Cook anxiously. Wonderful, said Despereaux. Too much garlic? Said Cook. No, said Despereaux, it's perfect. Cook smiled. See, she said, there ain't a body, be it mouse or man, that ain't made better by a little soup. Despereaux bent his head and sipped again, and Cook stood over him and smiled and saying, It don't need a thing then? Is that what you're saying? It's just right? Despereaux nodded. He drank the soup in big, noisy gulps. Gulp, gulp, gulp. And when he stepped out of the saucer, his paws were damp, and his whiskers were dripping, and his stomach was full. Cook said to him, Not done already, are you? Surely you ain't done. You must want more. I can't, said Despereaux. I don't have any time. I'm on my way to the dungeon to save the princess. Ha ha! Cook laughed. You, a mouse, are going to save the princess? Yes, said Despereaux. I am on a quest. Well, don't let me stand in your way. And so it was that Cook and... lost my place. And so it was that Cook held the door open to the dungeon while Despereaux rolled the spool of thread through it. Good luck, she said to him. Good luck saving the princess. She closed the door behind her and then leaned against it and shook her head. And if that ain't an indicator of what strange days these are, she said to herself, then I don't know what is. Me, Cook, feeding a mouse soup and then wishing him good luck in saving the princess? Oh my, strange days indeed. And there's another little illustration here of Despereaux sitting in the saucer drinking the soup at the cook's feet. And that is where we are going to leave off for today. I hope you guys enjoyed learning new vocabulary words. And then for next week, we are going to be finishing the book. Guys, look how much we have read. This is all that we've read. And then next week, we're going to read this little part right here. And we get to find out how Despereaux does on his quest. Okay? Thanks for reading with me. See you next week.